Hi everybody, thank you for joining me today. So on today's video I wanted to talk a little bit more about mixed media and really what it means to me. I'm going to share a few products and things that I've used probably more often when it comes to mixed media. For the most part, it's just using multiple items. It can be techniques. To me, it could be obvious things like embossing paste. You got watercolor. You can use paints and different gessos. A lot of times I'll put clear gesso down so you can still see the picture of something coming through even as you do all your coloring and stuff. But you can use the white or black, which I showed you. And then you can use embossing paste, crackle paste. I just showed you some alchemy paints. And you can use these using stencils, which we'll wind up doing as well. And a lot of different companies have the embossing paste, the crackle paste. I think some people use modeling paste. What it does is it gives you different textures as far as what you're adding to your project. Okay. And for today's, I'm going to start off, like I said, using the clear gesso. And this paper right here in particular, it was super thin. I probably should have left it a little bit bigger and taped it down, so then I could have just trimmed it, later on to the size that I want it. But it's okay. I just had to be gentle with it because, like I said, it was super thin, and once it was wet, it was very susceptible to tears. So right now I'm just trying to get a paper towel so I can clean off my brush and my work area, because of course I didn't put down my mat. So it's important because I don't want to have anything stay permanently on my table mat here. And a lot of times I just use my stamp cleaner, which is the Brutus Monroe stamp cleaner that we got. I think we can still get that at the boutique. I'll make sure to leave a link to that down below. But it helped clean off, my brush for the most part, and I used it to just clean around the lid so my top doesn't get stuck. So now I'm going to be smart and pull out my Tonic Studio mat. And what we're going to do, now that it's somewhat dry, but I'm going to heat it with my heat tool just to make sure it's completely dry before we do the embossing paste with the stencil. And if you ever have curling on your project, you can always lift it up and heat it from behind, and sometimes that will help any of the warping. Now what we're going to do is, you could technically take your embossing paste, the crackle paste, whatever it is you're using, and apply it straight to your project. If you do that, that's fine. Your embossing will be, the bright white, and you can go from there. But we can take it up a notch by coloring the paste that we're going to use. And you can use inks, you could use your distress inks, your distress oxides. There's so many different things you can use. You can use gelatos to mix in the pigment color. But I'm going to actually grab a product from Prima. This is an artisan powder, and this one is Antoinette Pink. And I just wanted to show you here, I'm going to take off the lid, but it's just loose powder, and all you do is you can tap it right into your embossing paste, just like I'm doing here. Normally I would leave the plastic in because it has holes and you can use it almost like a salt shaker and add the powder that way, but I wanted you to be able to see it. And all you do is you take your palette knife and you mix in the color into the embossing paste. So now you've created your own embossing paste with the color or the shade that you wanted to create. Now the key is, if you're doing a large project, to make sure that you do enough paste. You don't want to waste it, but you also don't want to have to mix it again and try and match an exact shade when you're just tapping some powder in. You know what I mean? So if it's a large project, err on the side of caution. Make sure you have plenty of embossing paste and go from there. Alright, so once we got that on, I'm going to go ahead and wash all my stuff off, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I cleaned off the mat, and I cleaned off the stencil, which is now nice and clean. If you wait too long, the embossing paste will get stuck on that, and it won't come off. It'll be like a hardened paste, and I don't like that. So I always make sure I run to the sink and clean my stuff off right away. And then I'm just heating our project one more time, only because I want to make sure the embossing paste is completely done. Completely dry, I should say. And I'm once again heating it from the back because it did start to curl up on me. Alright, so now that we have the clear gesso on, we've done the embossing crackled paste, we could leave it here, add some dimension, flowers, different stuff like that onto it. But I wanted to try adding a little bit of color with some sprays that I have. And I originally got this, I want to say these were last year, the Color Bloom 2 sprays. This one is Wild Raspberry. And then I also have one of the original Color Blooms, which is the Pearl White. So we're going to do a combination of both of those. And inside the sprays, if you ever do get some of the Prima sprays, they have the little balls inside where you can shake it to move around the pigment. So that way you get a better, more vibrant spray. So I was just hitting the project a little bit with the Pearl White. And now we're going to go in with some of the Wild Raspberry. And I'm just tapping using a napkin, because remember I told you this paper isn't meant to deal with a whole lot of water, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting the color without making it so that it's just going to rip in half. And then the key is when I do my last spray, just to make sure I don't dab out a whole lot of it, but enough that there's still some differences in lights and darks. And then I'm going to go ahead and once again, I'm spraying my board with that Brutus Monroe stamp cleaner. And we're going to go ahead and clean that all off. And once that's cleaned off, I'm just going to go ahead and remove my tonic mat. And I'm going to go ahead and get my card base ready. So I had gotten this paper pad from the Kaiser Craft Cherry Tree Lane, and their small pad is 6.5 by 6.5. So I decided I wanted to do a 5.5 by 5.5 square card. I don't know why, but I've been thinking about the square cards lately, so that's the kind of, I guess, kick I'm on. So all you have to do is take an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and you just cut it on the 8.5 side down to 5.5, and then fold your card in half, because the 11 inches would be 5.5 once folded. And then I'm just creasing my line, making sure everything is folded nicely. And then for the paper that we created with the embossing paste and the sprays, I decided I wanted to back that on a piece of white cardstock, and to add another layer of medias that we've used, I'm going to grab the mixed media, the Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and we're going to go around the edges on our white sheet, so that way it gives some definition, but it's not overly bold in its brightness. And then I'm just going to get this laid down evenly. And since the card is 5.5, I made the white sheet 5.25. And at this point, there were still some spots on this piece that we did that were still wet. So I'm going to go ahead and use my heat tool again on it, make sure everything gets nice and melted, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the ATG tape on the back. And when I go to lay it down, I realize I made the matte piece and my pattern piece here the same size. So I'm going to have to trim it down, and all I do is I turn my sheet upside down and put it in the trimmer, and I cut it down so that way it was 1/8 of an inch border. And then here all I'm going to do is I took some of the Prima Rose Gold Kissed flowers, and I'm attaching the flower and 2 leaves up in the top corner, and then the sentiment is actually from In Bloom. I got it from the chipboard pieces, and it says always bloom. And then once I got that laid down, and I did put a little bit of the glue behind it, I attached the last flower in the bottom right. And then while I was looking at it, I was like, you know what, I like this, but I think it just needs a little bit of splatter. It didn't need to be a crazy amount, but I did want to add some. So I added some water, grabbed one of my, I think it's a Prima actually, the Prima water brush that I have, and I just started to flick the black gesso all over the card. And normally when I use black gesso, I usually like to use white as well, or gold, or some other color. But on this one, because we had the rose gold flowers, I just left it with the black, and it was just enough. It wasn't too much. But I always like to, like I said, clean up kind of as I go, because it'll be my luck if I leave anything with ink on it and wet. I'm either putting my project on it or my hand in it. It never fails. So once everything is all cleaned up, because of course, you know, when you splatter, things go everywhere. I was looking, and on my desk I had some of the clear Nuvo drops. This one is Mountain Dew. Not Mountain. I said Mountain. Morning Dew. And what I like about it is it dries clear. So when you guys see the video or the close-up photos, they're going to look a little bit cloudy. But that's because I had just finished putting them on the different flowers. But once it's clear, it literally looks like little dewdrops all over your flowers. And it's really quite pretty. And whenever I do it, I always want to put a whole bunch more, but I try to refrain and just do a couple here and there. But I could have filled up the entire flower because it always turns out so pretty. Alright, so with the other part I wanted to share with you, here there's some stones that I have bought. You can see people have added that. You can add different laces. Mixed media is literally anything you can think of and putting it together. So if you like using laces and paints and art stones and buttons and sequins and whatever your heart's content, you can use those and put them all together. You know, I think a lot of people get intimidated by either mixed media or even, you know, shabby chic. I know I do. But we all just need to realize there's different levels to everything. And the most important thing is just to get into your room, get into your space, and create. Okay? So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm going to have links here to previous scrapbooking with me videos, technique videos. And then I'll also have links to everything I can down in the more section for items that I've used. And if you guys have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. And I look forward to seeing you with our next video, which will be this Friday. I'll be doing a Friday sketch video. Thanks, you guys, and have a great day.